to see a web PowerPoint on that.
Well, we're off and running again, but we didn't go very far from the center of town. We're at 41 Trafalgar Drive, a place where I've been before. Calvin said, "Do you know Andy Sajor?" And I said, "Yes, I've been there. Our kids, his kids, everybody's kids." Well, we're here for what I think is going to be a real fun program, because since our families were connected via my granddaughter and his daughter for inextricably for a long period of time, way back since the 80s, except peripherally and reading all of the wonderful things about Andy in the paper and seeing and hearing about all the great things he's done, we haven't chatted much. So we thought it's about time. How are you, Andrew?
I'm doing just fine.
Just wonderful. Just to look at this guy, you would never guess the places he's been and the things he's done. I walked in the door about 20 minutes ago, and we're recording this on the first day of July, 2004. And he said, "You wouldn't believe I've been doing everything." One-arm paper hanger doesn't begin to describe it, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's although this summer I'm looking forward to actually having a relaxing summer, I hope.
You've done so much. You've been so many places. But you wouldn't do it if you didn't want to, and almost every minute of it has been fun.
I can't think of any minute that hasn't been fun. If you're a type A personality and you have to keep busy, there's no better way to do it.
I've driven up the Northway, or should I say down the Northway, and looked over and seen what I thought had to be a blithering idiot who was crawling up the side of the mountain. Guess who it was? How many times have you been up the side of Poca Moonshine?
Oh, quite a few. You can't even catalog those, but that's just training, staying in shape. You have to be. It's a great life, but if you're not physically conditioned for it, it can be pretty boring.
This guy stayed in shape for a long time for that reason and for other reasons, and he's made some trips that we've only read about in National Geographic. And we're going to talk about all of that today and so many other things. We're going to pick the brain of Andy Sajor,
Slim pickings.
And pick it clean today. And we hope it'll give us a great program, because we know it will. Stay with us. If you listen carefully, you'll hear a rumbling in the background, and it's not my stomach for a change. It's a thunder cell that's going through the area in the North Country right now, and high winds and possible damaging hail and who knows what might accompany. But we checked the weather map a minute ago, and it looks like it might be heading north of us, and that's a good thing. Are you a weather nut?
Yeah, I have to say teaching has made it a big issue. I'm an earth science teacher at Peru, and so we have a complete weather station at our school now. And we actually post our weather on the web live, and we even have a weather cam that sticks right outside our science classroom window.
Great for kids.
Oh, it's wonderful. Actually, our students, the students that I have in the accelerated program, are part of a school program, S''COOL, which is the students' weather observation course. Well, it's a course, but it's also a project run by NASA at Langley. And what they do is the students do weather observations. And the satellites are looking down from space and looking at the weather maps that you see. And then humans get to look up and confirm what the scientists are seeing through the satellites. In order for the scientists to create the proper algorithms to interpret what the satellites are seeing, they need to know what's happening on the ground. So as the satellite makes a pass overhead, you download the pass time, and the students, I divide them up into groups of their own, and it's their responsibility. They take this on for no credit, no grade, other than it's their responsibility as a citizen to give back to the community. So as the satellite passes overhead, there's a certain time of day when that happens. They go out and they take their observation of the weather. They have to tell what type of clouds are going on, what's the air pressure, temperature, relative humidity, what is the ground cover like? Is it wet ground? Is there standing water? Is it snow? Is it ice? Are the trees have leaves? Are the trees bare? All this stuff is uploaded to the NASA website, and then the scientists get to use this data to check out to see if the satellites are performing the way they expect them to perform, and also to fine-tune the way they interpret the data. So the kids do this, and our students are usually up in the top 10 in the country as far as reporting.
Isn't that cool?
That's great.
I have to say that I'm a big fan of this kind of thing in the schools. You might say I'm a weather fan too, because I was on the radio here for so many years. It behooved me to know what was happening, and hopefully what was going to happen outside.
Right.
Gib Brown is our great mutual friend, and many years ago, Gib Brown came to me and said, "What would you say to having kids doing weather forecasts on the radio on a similar program from Aux Sable?" And I said, "Wow."
Yeah, Gib.
This is what a great idea, and they
he's
did
the
it, and they
forerunner in this field,
and
really.
they still do it. And I think it's terrific.
Yeah, Gib actually got me more involved. He was the SAR, the representative for the National Meteorological Association, and they ran a course over the summer, and I took that course with Gib as my primary instructor and mentor. And he's done a lot for the area as far as getting students involved in weather broadcasting, being aware of the weather. As I was saying earlier today, there were some kids outside that were completely oblivious to what was coming.
Selling lemonade.
Selling lemonade, and the clouds were coming in behind them. They were hidden by the trees, and they were just completely unaware of it. So I pulled over and said, "Kids, you got to go." And so they packed up and left, and it looks like just in time.
Who knows what's going to happen? Well, we're glad to have that happen. I want to, instead of going fast forward, I want to rewind the tape for a few minutes to go back to find out who Andy Sajor really is. Where were you born and brought up?
I was raised in White Plains, New York. And
come on, I never knew that to this moment because I lived in nearby Thornwood.
Well, actually, you're going to like this even better. I moved to Pleasantville,
oh my God.
And my best friends were living in Thornwood, up on the hill. And do you remember Ocello Electric and any of those people?
No, I don't. I was about 7 years old when I moved from Thornwood.
Okay.
I remember the Reader's Digest because my dad was a very poor...
Well, that's actually in Chappaqua.
In Chappaqua, but my dad was a poor preacher and worked there at night to put enough food on the table at the Reader's Digest. And, so I do remember a lot about that area because growing up as kids, and I remember very well White Plains.
Yep. No, it was a great place to grow up. It was very similar to the environment we have here today. Now, if you go back down to that area, it's all built up and it's very expensive. Every tiny houses are going for $500,000, and it's just outrageous. But in the 50s and 60s, it was a great place to grow up, and we had a woods behind our house just like we have here, and we'd be out and playing in the creek and making rafts to float out onto the pond, and you could ride your bicycle into town, and I rode my bike into White Plains, which was probably 15 miles away, and that was not considered dangerous in those days.
No, I've talked about it many times, and parents say, "What? Your parents let you ride your bike?" Sure.
Yeah.
My parents were alive now, they'd let me ride my bike, and I do.
Yeah. Actually, thanks to Charlie Mitchell, my co-teacher at Peru, he got me back into bike riding, and I've got a rack of bikes, and it's just the tough choice is what bike to take today: the mountain bike, the road bike, the cross bike. And I've been seen carrying a 2x4 on my shoulder going down the road with my bicycle instead of taking the car.
And I saw in the newspaper, and maybe Calvin or you saw it too, and I think she was an 86-year-old woman who says, "I bike everywhere," and showed her just trucking along, you know?
Yeah, that's it.
That's wonderful.
We drive too many cars.
Yeah, we do. So you born and brought up there, went to high school where?
Byram Hills, which is in Armonk. Went through school there, came to Plattsburgh to go to college.
Oh, you did? That's what brought you here?
That's what brought me here. I spent a lot of my time in high school coming up to the Adirondacks and into the Catskills to go hiking and climbing. And when I got to go to school here, I said, boy, this is the place to live. I don't have to travel anymore to go hiking and climbing. And so this was a great place to grow up, reach adulthood, really, and my academic career in the beginning was rather suspect.
Did you get a bachelor's here?
Yeah, I got a bachelor's here. It took me 20 some odd years, but I was just not mature enough the first time around. And I tell my students that sometimes when you go to school the first time, you may not be mature enough, ready for that commitment. And I worked in local industry here. Lloyd Archer gave me my first real job. And
Did he really?
yep.
I knew I'd get down to the nitty gritty.
If it wasn't for Lloyd Archer and QuickCast, I wouldn't be here.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
He's just
What a guy.
a prince of a man. And actually, that's what led to my job at the lighting department was
That was next. I was
Yep.
going to get to that.
Yeah, Walt-
MLD.
Walt Williams came to inspect my electrical work that I was doing for Lloyd at QuickCast, and he said, "Boy, we're having a test." And so I took that test, and lo and behold, I was number one on the list, so I ended up going to the municipal lighting department.
And worked there quite a long time.
23 years.
It's amazing. I think we touched on this when we started the program. Doors closed, doors open.
Yeah.
Paths appear before you as if by magic. And that happened to you.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
did you have this great epiphany? What was
I've led a charmed life. I have to say, when I met my wife in 1970, that was the most amazing thing because we knew then and there that we wanted to be together, and that's been the stalwart of my entire life, having her.
He's not saying that because she's in earshot either. And
She'd probably be embarrassed if I
well,
said it, but it's true.
But you know, I talk about Kay in the same way, and it's absolutely no secret that. And I told her with no one around but Kay last night, and then I told our son Rodney that when he came over. I do a lot of things like you do a lot of things, not nearly as much fun as the stuff you do, but I do a lot of things, and I could never do it. What I do in the course of a day or a week if I didn't have Kay to come home to, and that relationship. We talk a lot about religious faith and family relationships on this program, and we do it unabashedly because it's, you know, there are a lot of things that tend to tear down these institutions, and this kind of partnership is such a blessing, isn't it? To have somebody you can lean on, rely on,
Yeah.
bounce off of, communicate with.
Yeah, Kathy, I've learned a lot from her, and she's given us two great children, two good daughters, and one banging around out there. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be teaching, really.
Really?
Yeah. Both, when I made the decision to leave the lighting department to start teaching, it was basically a family meeting. And the need was, it's going to be a big change in lifestyle. My income was going to be cut in half, and it was going to mean everybody having to pull a little more around the house.
I remember those days, because we knew each other at that time.
Yep.
So what?
And so the girls said, if that's going to make you happy, you have to do it. And they stood behind me.
Isn't that cool? And have still.
Oh, yeah.
And I should say, for the benefit of our viewers who may not know, Kay and I had the great privilege of raising our grandchildren, Chad and Megan, after a terrible tragedy in 1988. And it just happened that Brooke and Megan were buddies, as they had so many buddies through school and through good vacations together. And gosh, what great times they were.
Yep, Brooke would spend a lot of time out at your camp, and you'd constantly driving them out to Morrisonville.
Whatever happened, it was a good experience. And now Megan is going to get married in early July of 2005, and that'll be a whole different experience for us. So, you made that decision. What year was that, Andy?
I'm always fuzzy on the year.
I can never remember dates and times.
I believe it was 1996 or 94. I can't even remember now, to be honest with you. It's bizarre, but it's in the past, and I always look forward to the future.
The next chapter tipped over, and you. Now, what did you have to do to make those preparations?
There was a lot of night school, going back to school. A woman, Ingy Lafleur, who was at Plattsburgh State, she convinced me to go back to school and get my degree. And I went to night school and then got to the point where I had to get a leave of absence from the city in order to continue my schooling. And so I put into the Common Council and they granted me. And I told them up front, I said, you know, the eventual hope is to become a teacher. But in this day and age, and knowing that there's a lot of teachers around, it probably won't happen. And so I did my student teaching, and then lo and behold, as soon as I got my graduation, within a few weeks, a couple of positions opened up. I applied, and Peru asked me to work for them. And I haven't looked back since.
You know, it's amazing that gold ring is just sometimes just out of our reach.
Yeah.
In your case, you were able to grab it.
Yeah, well, that's the advantage of this country, and I can't speak for a lot of others, is that anytime you want to change or do something, it's up to you to do it. And you have the freedom to do that here, which is very important.
Yeah.
And that you don't have to have an entire life in one career. You can make changes as you go along.
You know, speaking for somebody who stayed in the radio business for all those years and changed careers abruptly at age 60, I now talk to kids about, you know, grab it.
Yeah.
If an opportunity arises, grab it. If you fail at one career or are not happy going in one direction, go in another direction. That's what you said. This great country allows us.
Yeah. But, you know, to think about that, you spend so much of your time working. Why would you want to do something that you're not entirely happy at?
I hope people had their television sets loud enough and weren't with their heads in the refrigerator when you just said that. Because that's been my hue and cry. And Kay and I have raised a lot of kids, as you know. And I've had some of my kids come in saying, I can't stand this job. They're killing me. It's driving me crazy. You know what my stock answer is?
Mm-hmm.
You know, go down another road. Why would anybody want to spend a career in something and a job they couldn't stand every day?
Yeah, well, and to be perfectly honest, it's not that the municipal lighting department wasn't a great job. I really enjoyed the work. Working with those guys were really wonderful, but it was time for a change too. Sometimes it's not that the job isn't satisfying, but you also want to try something else, do something different. And I saw an opportunity to people complain about teaching and education and that kids aren't being motivated and pushed along. So it's the time to put your money where your mouth is and actually get out there and be part of, hopefully, attempt to be part of the solution than just complaining about the problem.
You know, they say push the envelope. You've pushed it. You know, you can either pull in your horizons or you can push them out. And you did the latter. And who knows what might be around the next corner. Because you're complaining because you're the age you are. But
I don't complain about my age.
But you know what? I wake up feeling great every day of my life and grateful for the opportunity to do whatever that next challenge is. And I'm sure you feel that same way.
Yeah.
And so you've touched a lot of lives in Peru. The teaching profession is immensely satisfying,
very
gratifying, and rewarding. But how did this other stuff happen? We're going to talk about some trips you took, and so I want to get into why you decided to do these things and how.
Well, one of the things as a teacher, it's not a job that you can be stagnant in and be effective. So as a teacher, and New York State has changed quite a bit now, you have professional development, and meaning that once you get your degree and you pass all the tests and you have your certification, you still have to go back and stay current. Science changes. When I went back to school, Plattsburgh State gave me credit for a lot of courses that I had taken back in the 70s. And I said, well, I'm going to audit those courses anyway and take them over because I know a lot has changed in the 20 years that has gone through. Yeah. So as a teacher, once you get out and you start teaching, it's the most difficult job I've ever had. I've spent more hours for very little compensation, but I really enjoy the time I spend, not only with the students, but with the research and learning new things. And what I have been able to do over the summer is apply for grants and go and work at various colleges under summer programs, and some of these have led me to being out in the ocean, into working off George's Bank, doing some research into sediments in finding the paleocurrent of the Gulf Stream. Where was it hundreds of thousands of years ago, and how did it change? Some of this was also working with scientists, taking their data that they were collecting from their satellites and from some of the scientific instruments, and converting those into programs for high school students and lab exercises to take the real science data and actually do something with it that is real-time and meaningful. This program came about a little differently. Richard Brandt, who's a scientist with the University of Washington, he's an atmospheric scientist. He has been coming to our classroom, he and Charlie Mitchell, mountain biking together, and so Richard came to our classroom, and I invited a nurse from the hospital, Chuck Serber, who is with the Air National Guard in Albany, and the two of them came and talked to our students for a whole day. They gave up their time, talked for a whole day, and about their Antarctic experiences. One as a support individual, and the other as a scientist, and you know, having to write grants. I mean, you survive by writing grants. It's not, you have a job. If you don't write a grant, if you don't have a scientific mission, you don't have a job. So there's two different ends of the spectrum here. And their talk was fascinating, and I guess Richard noticed that I was drooling all through his talk, because he mentioned that there was a program called TEA, Teachers Experiencing the Arctic and Antarctic. It's run by Rice University, American Museum of Natural History, CREO, which is the Cold Regions Research and Engineering Lab, Department of the Army Corps of Engineers. And it's all funded by the National Science Foundation. And so I went to their website and I downloaded the application, and it was probably the most difficult, longest. I wrote 30 pages
30
total.
30 pages?
30 pages. And
You had to have a committee to read the cut and pick it.
well, yeah, and so I've never thought it. The day before it was due, I had not thought that I had much of a chance, when you consider it's a nationwide search for teachers, and you know, there's thousands of applications, and I didn't think I'd have much of a chance. So at the very last minute, I decided, well, I wrote it all, I might as well just throw it in. And so I hit the send button, sent it in, and forgot all about it. And then a few months later, Wayne Succo from National Science Foundation, I was on my way out to do something, and phone rings, and I thought, I can answer it before I leave the house. And I picked it up, and Wayne Succo said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "What did I do wrong now?" And he said, No, this is good news." And he says, "You're a finalist for the National Science Foundation TEA program." And he said, "You know, you're down to we have 20 people. We're only going to take 12. 6 go to the North Pole, 6 go to the South Pole."
Aha, that's how it worked.
Yeah, and so, you know, at least I knew I had a pretty good shot. But then he said, "Would you consider going to the North Pole?" And I said, "No, I live at the North Pole." And he said, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, actually, I live north of North Pole." But he didn't understand the piece of geography humor there. But I said, "No, I live in the cold north. I know what it's like up here. To go further north, I want to see something in the extreme. And I may be shooting myself in the foot, but if I'm going to go, that's where I'm going to, if I'm going to be part of this program, that's where it's going to be. It's all or nothing." And I'm very glad I did that, because a couple of people who had no preference ended up getting positions at the North Pole, or in the Arctic, actually. And a couple of people dropped out because it was just something that they did not want to do. And that's too bad, because they're really gifted people. So anyway, long and short of it is, I was accepted into the program. That summer I ended up doing my training, my preliminary training at CREO, which is at Dartmouth, the Cold Region Center, which is in New Hampshire. And from there, I I was waiting to find out my assignment. And hopefully, the whole thought was I was going to work with Richard because I knew his science. My students, I had built some equipment that mimicked his equipment, so we were doing a series of readings and tests here in the North Country and comparing them to his readings and tests that he's doing in Antarctica. In fact, I've sponsored a web page for him on our website where he was uploading his journal to our web page and publishing pictures and stuff. So our students were always in touch with Richard while I was down there. We were kind of running our own informal TEA program. But that fell through. And all of a sudden I was, because he was working with a French and Italian research team, and there was issues about money and getting me in and getting me out and how much time I would be able to spend. And so I was really adrift for a long period. And finally, they had devised this plan. They sent me to Washington to meet with 6 paleontologists and sedimentologists, geologists, and to meet with them planning this, what they called the Beardmore Camp. It hadn't been done in 10 years, and it was very radically different from the earlier Beardmore Camp. Beardmore is a glacier in Antarctica in the trans-Antarctic mountains. And the last Beardmore Camp was a big deal. It had plywood buildings, and there were dignitaries and politicians there, so they had showers and mess tent and cooking areas and sleeping quarters that were really nice. This was going to be a low-cost mobile camp, like a MASH unit. Everybody's in tents. You're on the glacier for 6 weeks in tents. So all the logistics were going on. The people who were going to maintain and run the helicopter service for us, because our research was all going to be very high, at 12,500 feet. So the only way we could get there is by helicopter. So everybody was there, the Air National Guard, the private contractor helicopter service, Raytheon, who actually does all the logistics for the Antarctic expeditions, everything down there. And I got to meet all the scientists. And on paper, when a scientist who has competed at this level to get these grants, these are million-dollar grants, multi-million-dollar grants, and they hear that they're going to have to take a science teacher from upstate New York, not only that, an old science teacher from upstate New York.
Here he goes again.
They were all kind of a little concerned, and I think after they met me at the meeting, then all of a sudden everybody said, well, we want you to do this and we want you to do that. And having a fair amount of computer expertise was also you can't stress that enough. If kids today, if you not just become a computer operator but understand how computers work and how networking works, that's so important. Because that really wrote my ticket to all these science groups, because I was able to do some things that nobody else had ever been able to do from the glacier. But it turned out, in the long and short of it, that Bill Hammer, who's the professor at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois, he was going to be my primary sponsor. And so all the money was going to funnel through his grant program, and he was going to be chiefly in charge of me. And Bill is this fantastic professor. I always joke that because he has the same hairline I have, that's why we were such good friends, and we were the same age. And but he was a 6-time. At that time, he had been to Antarctica 6 times.
Wow.
And so he was a big veteran. He would laugh all the time this meeting's going on. He would joke and laugh, and he says, you know, all this planning means nothing, because when we get there, all this goes out the window. Nature tells you what you're going to do, tells you when you're going to do it, and tells you how long you're going to do it. All this stuff means nothing. And he was right. He was right. We had planned for a month on the glacier, and we actually got 6 days of work out of that 1 month.
You gotta be kidding.
That's it. And I thought, if anybody...
All because of weather?
Well, weather, helicopter crashes, technical problems, things like that. But, and I thought, you know, here's this guy, he has waited 13 years to get back to this glacier and to get up on this mountaintop to pull the dinosaur out. And I thought he would be just hopping mad. And he was in the best mood of everybody. He said, you take what Antarctica can give you. This is the experience. He said, you hope that you get this work done, but if you can walk away with one thing, be happy.
Did we whet your appetite yet? We're talking with Andy Sajor here on Trafalgar Drive in Plattsburgh, and we're going to take a trip through the miracle of computer graphics and photographs. So stay with us. The best part is yet to come.
Do this, so at least it's a plain screen.
All right, we're getting ready again, and we're going to show you a little presentation here that I think you will enjoy. Tell us what it's going to be, Andy.
Daphne Kutzer at the college went down to Antarctica as a tourist a couple of years, a year before I went down. And she was so inspired that she wrote a number of poems. And while I was in Antarctica, we were emailing back and forth, and she was sending me her...
Let's see, that was an extemporaneous beep from the bread maker. Pay no attention, the world is not coming to an end. You still have a few minutes left. So,
all right, so anyway, Daphne, while I was in Antarctica, she was sending the program her poems to me, and as I was looking at the environment around me, which is otherworldly, I was keeping in mind her poems, and when I got back, she and I did a joint presentation, and this PowerPoint that you're going to see is the prelude to our talk. We both talked. One talked about, I talked about the science end of Antarctica, and she talked about her impressions as an artist and writer of Antarctica. And the bottom line is the two of us want to go back in the worst way for much the same reasons.
yeah.
So this PowerPoint I put to some music by Debussy, and there's some quotes from Shackleton, some of her poetry, and I think it's somewhat interesting.
All right,
So
let's do it. And
here
you're
we
going to
go.
read the poetry.
Yes. And we go to slideshow, review slow. This actually is going to be on the National Science Foundation website, too.
Ooh,
They've
good.
asked for a copy.
Great. I like it so far.
Men go out into the void spaces of the world for various reasons. Some are actuated simply by the love of adventure. Some have the keen thirst for scientific knowledge. And others again are drawn away from the trodden paths by the lure of little voices, the mysterious fascination of the unknown. Indeed, the stark polar lands grip the hearts of men who have lived on them in a manner that can hardly be understood by those people who have never got outside the pale of civilization. Ernest Shackleton, 1910. This is the story of 6 men in search of our planet's past, and one woman's impressions through poetry of the majesty that is Antarctica. As if penguins were not comical enough, the soles of their feet are corrugated, pink sneakers to climb white ice. Penguins are the wise fools of the ice. On rocky shores, safe from seals, they waddle, trip, fight over pebbles, squawk at the sky. But they drop their harlequin act in the sea. Their fool's costume protects them from predation. From the wrath of the ruling seals and orcas who mistake white for ice and black for sea. The penguins leap and play like dolphins, laughing in the sharp-jawed face of death. The scientists, however, came to a land that is an ice-covered desert. Here they lived high on the Antarctic glacier and worked on a mountain 12,500 feet high, where simply walking makes your heart race and your breathing rapid. This is a land where under a deep blue sky, katabatic winds reach hurricane strength and rearranges the snow so that it obscures your feet, making you walk with a constant lean, as if walking on a listing ship. But when the helicopters could fly and brought us up to Mount Kirkpatrick, we worked, putting in 12-hour days, drilling, cutting, mapping, and blasting. On hands and knees, we dug through the scree, all to collect our quarry, the fossil remains of the Cryolophosaurus. When the weather was good and we worked, spirits were high. But when the weather was bad and we were confined to camp, spirits dropped. There was a time to read and reflect, and times to gather and feast. But in the end, it was a time of discovery and recovery. And even though Mount Kirkpatrick's fury tried to stop us, it gave up some of its treasures to Dr. Hammer's team. But in the end, even with hundreds of pounds of bounty, there is much left undone, more to excavate, more to explore, reasons to return. Antarctica still holds many secrets waiting for us to uncover. But that, according to Dr. Hammer, is what experiencing Antarctica is all about. You can go with the mission and plan, but you can only return with what Antarctica gives you. Penguins, for no apparent reason, stretch their necks, tilt their heads skyward, flap their stubby wings, and make raucous squawk. Just as suddenly, they stop. Biologists say it's a mystery. The penguins know. The only mystery is why the sky does not splinter into ice.
Oh, that's nice. And good music, too. Very good choice. Did you have any help with choosing the music?
No, I put that together.
Yeah, that's really, really nice.
I love that kind of captures, I hope captures, that's New Zealand, by the way. On our way out, I got to spend 12 days in New Zealand.
Beautiful formations.
Oh, incredible. They call this pancake rock, and this is actually very similar to the limestone we have here in the North Country, but the eroded material and the drop in sea level has been so great that this area is really very amazing looking. It's, again, it's probably one of the most fantastic islands I've ever seen. It has everything that we have in the United States all on this one little island.
Yeah.
The Sierra Nevadas, tropical rainforest. You walk out of a rainforest right onto a glacier in New Zealand. Where else can you do that?
Not very well, no.
I have, let's see, where do we want it?
All right, let's get into it here. Let's look at some good pictures. You talk as you go.
Okay, as we saw this in the original PowerPoint, this is Dr. Hammer, who is really, he kind of looks like Santa Claus, and he was my personal Santa Claus because he gave me the best present I could ever have. And it was, he included me in the expedition, and it was lucky for me, unlucky for another gentleman who was part of the expedition, and he became very ill and at the last minute had to drop out. So I went from a person who was going to be shared among 6 groups to being able to concentrate and work with just one group, which for me was a lot better because I learned a lot more science and I didn't have to feel like I had to please a whole bunch of people. I just had one team to work with. So this is Dr. Hammer sitting on, this is Mount Kirkpatrick. This is 12,500 feet, so that's the glaciers are way below. You can see everything here. There's that elevation down there is about 6,000 feet, and so these are the mountaintops that are sticking out. Now this is sedimentary rock, which means this was at one time underwater, below sea level. And so now at 12,500 feet, you can see that the earth has shifted and moved a lot. And this is exactly where the dinosaur is. He's actually sitting on part of the dinosaur.
Is he really?
Yes.
I love it.
Here's our little image of, this is Ross Island. This is where McMurdo base is. And we fly into this area on the Transantarctic Mountains. And then we're going to work up on Mount Kirkpatrick. So that's pretty much what we were going to do there. So you see, we actually got down to about 86 degrees south latitude, which meant the sun never set. We had 24 hours of sun. This is the femur of the Cryolophosaurus. This is what Dr. Hammer discovered on the 1991 trip, and this is what made the big find. And it was purely serendipitous. They knew that this was an area where Jurassic age sediments would be found, which means about 200 million years old rock. Sedimentary rock is the only type of rock that you'd find, basically the only type of rock that you would find fossils in. And they landed on this site, and just shortly after landing, this is what they discovered right in front of their face. So they knew they had a big find, but this was at the very end of their expedition. So they didn't have a lot of time to get anything out. They took what they could, and this return trip was planned to get the rest of this dinosaur out, as well as explore other areas in the Hansen Formation, which is part of this sedimentary structure.
Did you know about this creature before?
Yes, yes. This was a big deal.
Tell us how big it is and a little bit about it.
This it's about 12 feet tall, maybe 30 feet long. It's a theropod, which means it's a meat-eating dinosaur. And it was the first meat-eating dinosaur discovered in Antarctica. There were other dinosaurs found. But what made this very important, it's also the oldest. It's about 200 to 210 million years old. So it's a very early and very primitive theropod, and it was a very important find in National Geographic, made the news. In fact, coming back from this expedition, we made the news. We were on CNN and CBC because one of our researchers, Dr. Philip Curie, is from Drumheller, Alberta, and he's in charge of the Paleontology Museum out there. He's the curator of that museum, and he's world-famous paleontologist. So, as I explained to a lot of people, it's like going to college without final exams. I had some of the most fantastic professors and brilliant minds hanging around, and they all love to talk about their science, and so you got a free education. This is that femur cleaned up. After it's removed from the rock, it's cleaned up and epoxied where parts are missing and stuff. But this is what basically happens. You remove the dinosaur from the rock as best you can. You, like a big jigsaw puzzle, you pull pieces together and you glue it together, and then you assemble the dinosaur. This rock here itself is actually part of the dinosaur. It's a small section of a long bone of some sort. This is the mudstone. And this more maroon-colored rock is actually part of the bone. And a lot of people say, well, how do you know it's bone? And again, you just look at the structure. The structure on the outside, very smooth, and you can see fibrous-looking material. And then when you look on the inside, you see a cellular structure. So looking at that, it looks like it were a regular bone. Different coloring is because this is permineralized. The actual calcium of the dinosaur bone has been replaced by the minerals in the surrounding rock, the material that it was deposited in. This is kind of an exciting find, but we'll get to that a little bit later. This was what was pulled out on the first trip, and what you see here is this crest, and this is the eye socket and vertebrae back here. So this is kind of the head smashed, and that's what made this dinosaur so exciting for a number of reasons. Some people refer to this dinosaur as Elvis, and the name Cryolophosaurus refers to cryo, meaning cold. Lophos is the crest right here, this frozen crested, and saurus lizard. So it's the frozen crested lizard, and people, some scientists have thought of this as Elvis Presley's pompadour hairdo. This was purely for ornamentation, probably something to attract a mate. It wasn't used as anything as far as weaponry goes, but again, it was very interesting to come across this. So I got to see this in the museum itself, which was really cool. That's the reconstruction of the skull. Taking all those bones, carefully cleaning them and putting them in order. Then a sculptor actually creates this casting based on all the bone pieces and what they can find, and reassembles it in this manner. And the entire dinosaur looks like this. And this is at Dr. Hammer's museum at Augustana College. So it's completely assembled, and although there was a lot of stuff that only about 35% of the dinosaur was recovered, enough of it morphologically could be gleaned out so that they can determine the size and the shape of the vertebra, the long bones, the jointed material. Excuse me. And a lot of it is based on knowledge of other dinosaurs. So a lot of people talk about paleontology as being part fiction, part real. Yes, that's true to an extent, but the fiction is based on knowledge of all the other dinosaurs that are out there, and so it's a pretty good assumption that this is fairly accurate. William Stout is an artist who did some renditions of what the dinosaur may have looked like living in Antarctica at that time. You notice the volcano in the background. And you'll see a picture later of the team of scientists standing in front of Mount Erebus, which is the only active southernmost volcano, the southernmost active volcano in the world today. How do you get there? Kids always want to know. Well, it takes about 30 hours to fly from Plattsburgh to Albany, Albany, Chicago, Chicago to L.A., L.A. to Auckland, New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand to Christchurch, and you spend a day in Christchurch at the American Antarctic Program, excuse me, where you get your equipment, your cold weather gear, they make sure that you have everything you need. Your whole life will fit into 2 bundles. And this is Dino. My sister gave me this dinosaur from her kindergarten class in Oswego, New York. She's a kindergarten teacher, and I took this dinosaur everywhere with me in Antarctica, and I would take pictures of Dino. He flew the airplane, the Herc, and he flew the 140 C-140 that we flew in on, and everywhere I went. So the students, and I would email these pictures back to her classroom, and so they got an idea of scale and how big things are around them. So you land in New Zealand, which is this incredible country, and green and mountainous and some glaciers still, and meet up with the rest of some of the team. Actually, this is an outbound group, but I just wanted to show you how comfortable it is in New Zealand, which is not that far away from Antarctica. And you know you're getting to the end of the world when you find signs like this. Keep back 50 meters from the edge of the earth. I love it. So that's actually a boat launch, but they don't want you getting too close to the edge. So. And this is where it all starts. United States Antarctic Program Clothing Distribution Center. And once you get in there, it's like a big Walmart and Sam's Club, except you don't have to pay for anything. And they have 2 bags with your name on it. And before you go to Antarctica, after getting a complete physical where they check every orifice, every blood sample, specimen, you go through the most rigorous physical that I've ever had in my life. Stress test, everything. You name it, they check it. But they also want your hand size, your clothing size, everything. You have to give them a hand tracing, foot tracing. And you get there and you get 2 orange bags, and they tell you that no matter what you brought, whatever you want to bring from here on has to fit in those 2 orange bags. That's it. So for the next 2 months, your life is going to be in those 2 orange duffels. And so you go through it at that point. Your cold weather gear, everybody has the same issue jackets and long johns. You go through it to make sure everything fits, but if you have something that's better than what they're giving you, you can bring your own stuff, and which I had done. Living here in the North Country, we're always prepared for it, so it was not a big deal for me. But there's also people from Alabama, Florida, from southern areas, tropical zones. This is the luxurious conditions.
The lap of luxury, yeah.
Yep, this is flying from Christchurch to Antarctica, and I was very fortunate. I got the last jet out. From there on, it was this was from San Diego, and so this was a 5.5-hour flight total from wheels up to touchdown. And the following flights were all going to be Hercs because the ice was starting to thin and they couldn't fly something this big.
Tell our audience that's the Hercules.
The Hercules, which is based here in Albany, New York, the Scotia. And so it was neat to be there and see all the Scotia names and Spirit of Amsterdam and everything. So anyway, that's your knees to knees. This is your great in-flight meal that you have. There's your in-flight entertainment, whatever you brought to read. And noisier, you plugged your ears, and they did take my fingernail clippers that I had in my pocket.
You should have known.
Yeah, well, I did it just for grins. I pulled it out and I said, I've got fingernail clippers. Is that okay? And the woman took it from me and she says, we'll have them for you when you land. But what was really surprising, because there's all types of things, sharp objects and tools and things hanging overhead. These are drums of diesel fuel. So, you know.
Go figure.
Go figure. And it was a military flight, too. So, anyway, and then you touch down and you land. 5.5 hours later, you come out. There's the sun in the sky. This is about noon in Antarctica. You're on 12
Think
feet.
about it.
The noon
Think
sun
about
must
it.
be up at the top of you.
Yeah. But that's it never set while I was in McMurdo either, so that's pretty interesting. There's about 12 feet of ice right here, and the planes are all taxiing around on the ice. We get there, and they're yelling at you to get out of the plane and into this vehicle here called Ivan the Terrabus, which is kind of cool.
Aren't they unbelievable?
Oh.
We've seen them around the Arctic Circle.
Yep.
It's amazing.
And
Get a little perspective on the height of the tire.
Yep. But they hustled us out, and we're all kind of like the Muppets, staring around and looking at our
Of
mouths
course.
open. And they're all shoving, we've been here before, get in the thing and get off the ice. And this is Observation Hill. One of the best books to read is Shackleton's Further South. And they have it out in paperback now, and it's an abridged version. It's still like 900 pages or something. I don't know. But this is one of the hills he talks about, and I was very fortunate. Our mountaineer got us to places where a lot of people don't go on our shakedown trip. Our mountaineer, Peter Braddock from New Zealand, had been there 27 seasons, and he was the man. Whenever you say, well, our mountaineer is Peter Braddock, people would stop and genuflect. I mean, he was that type of hero worship down there.
Sounds like you lucked out all the way around.
All the way around. I told you, I live a blessed life.
I love it.
And but this is one of the hills that Shackleton refers to. They would go up on top of this hill to look for people to be coming in from the regions, because you could see a long way and still be very close to the survival huts. This is on the top of Obbs Hill, looking back into McMurdo. This is the graduate student, Nate Smith, who was part of our team. He and I were the first two in of the team, and our job was to ready all the equipment, make sure everything arrived safely, and we could get it all ready to go out into the field. But if you look at McMurdo, it looks like a mining town. You think you were out in Colorado in the wintertime. The soil itself is all volcanic tufts and very sharp. It's like lava rock that you would have in your gas stove, the same exact material. And the number one injury down there is scratch corneas from people not wearing their sunglasses on a sunny day, a day that's not sunny, and the powder gets blown around and scratches your cornea. So you just wore glasses off.
Guess that you would have that problem.
Well, the winds here are often very high winds, because there's no trees, no real anything to stop it.
We're
It's
talking, what, 50, 60?
70, 75.
Okay.
Hurricane strength wind.
Yeah.
I should go to the next one. Come on.
We were on Kauai in April, and some of the beaches
There
are
it is.
that color.
Yeah, that's it. That's that black. That's why it took so long. This is a panorama. Unfortunately, you can't blow it up. Here's Peter. One of the jobs is once. I felt bad because I told my students, feel bad for me. I'm going to be eating freeze-dried food. You're going to have great Thanksgiving dinner.
I can see all the freeze-dried Jell-O.
And it's going to be terrible. And it turned out I gained 15 pounds while I was down there.
Come on.
Yeah, and I exercised every day, but the food was incredible. And you go to this big commissary,
go.
again like a Sam's Club, and you just pull whatever you need out. and you pack it in a tri-wall, you scan it, so it gets charged to your group, and you just put it in a big carton, and then it's going to be shipped out to your site. And you didn't have to worry about it. And we ended up bringing 20 pounds of frozen shrimp, T-bone steaks,
This is really
halibut
tough.
steaks that were
The
that
flight
thick.
was the toughest part of the thing.
Oh, it was.
I love it.
And we all liked to cook. Peter liked, everybody on our team liked to cook,
Wow.
so we were all trying to outdo each other with meals once we were on the glacier. This was my walk to work every morning while we were in McMurdo. We spent the first week getting everything together, getting our gear checked out. We have to go to Happy Camper School, learn survival techniques, but it's much like Plattsburgh Air Force Base used to be. You notice that the heating and
Sure.
lines were all above ground.
Steam
Lines, everything of that nature. And I'd walk over this walkway, and we had an office in the Crary Lab here, and that's where we were making sure our maps were there, getting our gear together, sorting out our GPS equipment. This was upstairs in the library, Dr. Hammer. This is Dr. Philip Curie, who is that paleontologist and dinosaur hunter from Alberta, Canada. He spends half his time in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia and also in Patagonia doing research and excavations. World renowned, been on National Geographic several times, NOVA programs. Very, very well-respected man, and just an everyday kind of guy, a very gentlemanly person. This is Peter Braddock, our mountaineer. As I said, he's 27 years. He was an art teacher in New Zealand, and was also teaching, had an outdoor club at his school where he was working, and had an opportunity to go with the Kiwis to Antarctica, and was hooked ever since, and ended up being a freelance mountaineer for 27 years now. Kevin Kruger, who is a geotechnician, and his part of the team was, he's an expert in excavating dinosaur fossils, and any type of fossil, actually, removing them from the rock without actually hurting the fossil. Very, very skilled man, again from Drumheller, Alberta, and has that real thick accent, really delightful person. And Nate Smith, who was the graduate student, and he was a former student of Dr. Hammer. He's doing his master's thesis on this dinosaur, looking at the morphological importance of it. This image, I don't know if you can zoom in on it, but you can see that's 11:30 at night, nice sharp shadow. This is, I think, 4 o'clock in the morning. This is, I think, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that looks like 8 o'clock at night. So sun 24 hours a day.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. You walk to work in the morning and the sun would be over one shoulder, and you'd spend a long day in the lab, and on your way home at night the sun would be over the other shoulder. Just wouldn't set.
Yep.
Just goes.
I got a question on the sundial. How can you get a sundial when the sun doesn't go around? It just.
The sun goes around. It just circles the sky.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's circling you lowly in the sky.
Exactly right. I have to get that phone.
Yeah. No. Okay, we pause for a moment. Go ahead.
This is the dorm rooms in the main dormitory area in McMurdo. You can see that we would try and get together before dinner, have a little cocktail hour, a little bit of civility, but you can see everybody's exhausted. I mean, the sun never sets, and you really you work all the time. You're just afraid of making a mistake, missing something, making sure everything was ready and raring to go. And I had mentioned earlier snow school. Well, one of the things everybody has to do when you come in is you have to go to snow school, and one of the things you have to learn is how to rescue somebody who disappears into a blizzard. And so just like a pilot will wear a hood for their instrument check, at the very end, after we devised a plan, they put these buckets over our head, and we had to go and see if our plan worked. And the plan consisted of all our team holding to a rope and then sweeping the area. And when you stepped on the missing person, you knew you had found them. So that was one of the techniques. The other thing that went, this is called building a quincy. You take all your gear, put it in a pile, cover it with a tarp, cover it with snow, wait about an hour, and you can pull the gear out and you have yourself an igloo. That's how how fast the snow packs. It's very different. The snow is very old. Very little new snow comes. It just rearranges the old snow, and it's almost like styrofoam bricks. It interlocks very quickly, and it just sits there. So it's pretty neat. This was the only freeze-dried meal I had, which was during the snow school, because the theory of the snow school, anywhere you travel, if you leave McMurdo's, you have to carry a survival bag with you. And in the survival bag is a tent, is a sleeping bag, a gas stove, fuel, a book, survival rations, and a cook kit, and a radio, a VHF radio. So you always had that, and this snow school is to teach people how to use that. Now, for most of us in the North Country who like to camp and be outdoors, this was nothing new to us, because I've had worse conditions. I've had more miserable camping conditions here than I ever had while I was in Antarctica. But for a lot of people, this was a brand new experience for them, so it was pretty interesting. And here you can see the folks learning how to use the stove. He was from Bolivia, so he never had any need to use anything there. And my group, since we were going to be up at altitude and working near glaciers, we had to learn some crevasse rescue techniques, which was new to me. I'd never worked in crevasses before. I'd done a lot of climbing, but not crevasse rescue. So here we are off to do our practice in the ice falls. Yeah. And the other thing we were going to do is, since we were going to be working at 12,500 feet, and the atmosphere is thinner down there than it is up here, because the air is thinner at the poles. There's less atmosphere at the poles. So if you're at 12,000 feet in Antarctica, it's like being at 15,000 feet up in the northern climates, because there's less air pressure. My watch was actually reading 18 inches of mercury. Normally it's 29 to 30 inches.
No kidding.
That's how low it was.
Wow.
So we had to practice using this gamma bag, which is just like a big tube, and you slide inside and you zip it up, and the person inside gets a bottle of water, a book to read, a flashlight, and an envelope. And I said, "What's in the envelope?" And he says, "Well, it's a razor blade." Razor blade. And he says, "Well, you can't open the zipper from the inside. And if the guy on the outside has a heart attack while he's keeping you pressurized, how are you going to get out?" Hence the razor blade.
Point.
Hence the razor blade. So, and here you could see the actual difference. The instructor had the same type of watch I had. I gave one of the volunteers my watch, and he went inside the bag. And the instructor had his watch outside. So you can see the altitude outside was 2,000 feet. And by pressurizing the bag, pumping it up, we have a minus 880 feet. So we effectively had dropped this person as if he was below sea level, which allows more oxygen to infuse, and you can get rid of the altitude sickness issue. And as I mentioned earlier, I had to learn how to drive one of these, the piston bully. And we're on our way out to our shakedown trip now. This was just to practice with our equipment, make sure it all worked. And on the way out, our mountaineer says, "Oh, let's stop and take a break. It's time to take a little walk around." And we got out, and sure enough, a bunch of emperor penguins come walking up. He knew where they were. Actually, I think he just hit a button.
You think so?
But this, in the background, that's Mount Erebus. You can see the steam puffing out of the top of it there. The Antarctic Treaty that was signed in 1961 makes it a criminal offense to endanger the life or interfere with the life of any Antarctic animals. So you can sit and they can come to you, but you can't go to them. And if you make them move, you're in violation of that treaty. So, and it's very strictly enforced. But you anthropomorphize whenever you see them. It's just an incredible group of animals, and they walk and they talk and they're very curious, but then when they've had enough of you, they just walk away.
Done.
They're done. And as I said, they'll come right up to you and whisper in your ear. Again, here's our team: Dr. Hammer, Peter Braddock, Nate Smith, Kevin Kruger, Dr. Philip Curie and myself, and Mount Erebus in the background puffing steam. That's 15,000 feet. And that's the other thing. You lose all sense of perspective. You have no trees, no houses to really gauge what things are. So you don't know if something's a 10-minute walk or an hour walk.
So 15,000 feet, what troubles did you have? Breathing?
We didn't have any. I had been working out. Charlie had me on this exercise routine. I was bicycling 15 miles every day in the morning.
Charlie's a lot younger than you.
That's right, but he's a good taskmaster.
Oh.
And Charlie's.
I wonder if he knows I know his nickname is Tiger.
Oh, he probably does.
Yeah, he probably does.
If you saw one of these Waddell seals, you were also very cautious because they only came out of big cracks. And so when you were driving a vehicle, you made sure that you were very cautious driving because you didn't want to drive into one of those cracks that these guys came out of. But again, very docile, mom and her pup.
Amazing animals, aren't they?
Oh, and to survive, I mean, it would be blowing miserably and they'd be laying there.
Look at the face.
Yep, and you could walk right up to them.
Yeah.
And they would just kind of give you a little fish breath.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. Now this is Shackleton's hut on Cape Royds. We got out to Cape Royds, which was really exciting. And this is a historic site. Even the garbage dump is protected.
Of course.
Oh,
Yep.
why not?
Everything's
Sure,
categorized. It's just the way they left it.
What year? What was it,
19.
when?
This is 1909 to 1907 and 1909, I believe. Inside, just as if last person out just
Yeah.
closed the door, expecting to walk back in, and never did.
But soon to be 100 years ago. Wow.
Yeah, over 100 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just in a few years.
1909
Yeah,
to
1909.
2009,
Yep,
yeah.
very close. So it's actually going to coincide with our International Polar Year, which is going to be 2007, 2009 is going to be the International Polar Year. That's what I was in Washington for, to get that going.
Makes sense. Great.
Their cook stove, long underwear, socks hanging by the fire still, no different. And this was the rookery where they were. This is an Adelie penguin, which is a different penguin, and a rookery. There's only about 15% of the population here. A couple of years ago, they were really decimated. The females laid the eggs, the males then incubate them, and the females go out to sea to feed. And an ice flow, I think it was B12, one of the icebergs came in and choked off the access to the colony from the females, and they were trapped like 7 miles or 3 miles out to sea, and they couldn't get in, and so 85% of the population was wiped out, and they're just starting to recover now.
Are they bigger or smaller than the emperor?
Smaller than the emperor. These guys, you'll see a close-up of them. You can see there's a researcher's tent there. There were signs posted. You couldn't go into the rookery. We had to stay a distance. So this is shot with a telephoto. And they were working their way out into the open water. You can see this is already the end of November, and there's open water very close to Antarctica. Getting ready to go swimming. Always debating who's going to go in first. And our campsite out there, we were testing our HF radio to make sure that was going to work. And then down the road, we were about 1.5 kilometers away from the rookery. All of a sudden, I see these figures coming down, and I said, "Who's coming to visit?" And sure enough, 5 Adelies came down to check out our campsite. And they walked all over, and they came.
Amazing creatures.
Oh, came right up
Look
to
at
us.
this.
Even posed for us.
Gosh, come on.
Gave me that "you want a piece of me" look. And I had Channel 57, Mountain Lake Public Television, lent me a video camera. And so I have about 3 hours of videography down there that I have to put into some semblance of order. But I set the camera down, turned it on, and they were very curious and came up looking at it, putting their head from side to side. So I've got a lot of nice video of the penguins. And the kids, once the penguins came on the scene, then the kids really became excited about what was going on. Starfish in the middle of nowhere, dropped by a bird. Probably one of these. This is a skua. And these guys are a cross between a hawk and a pigeon. And they're everywhere where humans are. Very tenacious and not afraid. And they steal anything. A lot of times they could barely fly and they still try and steal it. So the phrase is, if you lose anything in Antarctica, it's been skewed. That's the term. The one bad storm that lasted a couple of days and that kept us from getting out onto the glacier was pretty bad. And you can see that the door to the office, this is the building, is actually a freezer door, like a Hobart freezer.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the doors
That's
are.
it.
So I spent a couple extra days working in the office, just writing my journals and gazing out the window, hoping for the weather to break so we could get our flight out to the glacier and start working on our dinosaur project. And finally, here's the Spirit of Freedom from the Albany Air National Guard, and we got our flight out to the glacier. This was a little more comfortable. We weren't as cramped, and there were windows that we could see out of quite easily. So it was a nicer flight out, but still very noisy. You can see and this is what we were flying over. Just
Look at this.
miles and miles of mountain range. This is the Transantarctic Mountains, the glaciers. One glacier just tumbling into another. And here's the camp. And this is, again, out in the middle of nowhere. Nearest humans to this place were 350 miles away. When it's quiet, you don't hear anything. There is nothing. It is just the blood in your ears. Pretty amazing. You land, they keep you seated, they open up the back of the airplane, they unhook all the straps to the cargo pieces, and accelerate. It's like going to the dump. That's how they offload them.
Just like the dump truck. Huh?
Yep, just go into the dump and you back up and hit the brakes. Well, this time they just accelerate out and everything goes sliding out the back of the airplane. And then finally, you can see it way out in the back there. And the last thing that gets off the plane is us. Engines keep turning the whole time. This is probably, again, let's see, the sun angle. This is probably about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And these planes would land on skis. Just an amazing looking. The machine's taking a little bit of time here. These are big pictures.
Oh yeah, it's amazing that it goes that fast.
Come on.
When exactly were you there?
It was November and December of 2003. So I got home January 18th, or January 13th of this year.
So you were there for Christmas?
Yep. I was there for
Oh.
Thanksgiving, and the only 2 days the people get off, they work a 6-day week, 9-hour day, the people who support. And so they get Thanksgiving off and they get Christmas off. And these are big, big to-dos. You'll see a picture towards the end of Christmas. And that's a big, important time. I don't know what's going on here.
Oh, look at this.
This is 24 hours of sun on the glacier itself. So you can see the lowest it got was
Yep.
higher than it was actually here at noon.
Wow.
So getting around, that Skidoo is probably from 1965 or something. It still runs like a top. It had serial number 100 on it.
Isn't
That's
that
how old it
amazing?
was. But you could see it was bitter cold. It would be 0, 20 below. But with the sun out, as long as the wind wasn't blowing, you can see the flags are out straight. If the wind wasn't blowing, it was quite comfortable, and you'd be fairly relaxed. But when the wind came up, it was dicey. And this is what was going on. Once we got to the camp, we thought, well, we're golden, we're ready to go. But that's where we had to work. And if you couldn't see where you're going to work, you couldn't fly. So that was a big problem. We got there and we had to wait until the weather cleared. The weather cleared and they started putting up the radio repeaters and our helicopter crashed. And nobody was injured, fortunately. He got up. Everything was very high altitude. We were working at the operational limits and the helicopter just lost lift and it dropped
How
20
many
feet.
times have you heard that happening in rescue attempts?
Oh, It's dangerous work. So we spent a lot of time in our cook tent. We had this tent set up just for cooking in, and just chewing the fat, talking about what our plans are going to be. The tent itself, anything high in the tent would stay fairly warm. Anything low in the tent would freeze solid. So Nate was our dishwasher that day, showing that we tried to do everything. This was my tent, and you can. It was very comfortable. I never
Took you
once
a long
got.
time to read that book, Andy. See the title?
Yep, that's I chose
Good
that book, and it was an excellent book. Actually, it was good diversion. You could see that I'm not dressed very warmly. I never got in my sleeping bag once out on the glacier.
No kidding.
My tent would go from a low of 38 degrees to a high of 70 degrees because the sun beating down on it. And as long as and I built a windbreak out of snow, so as long as the wind wasn't cooling the tent off, it was very comfortable in there. This was all the kids wanted to know, where'd you go to the bathroom? Well, that's the toilet tent. And if there were gloves on either side of the stake by the door, you knew it was occupied. And it was a very crude facility, but
Does it look familiar, Calvin?
just like hunting
Been
camp.
there, done that.
Yep. But more than often, this is what you'd have. You'd have these high velocity winds, clear blue sky, and the snow would just rearrange itself. And so nothing was flying. Everybody was confined to camp. Like I said, your feet would disappear. And you couldn't see your feet because the snow was just blowing so violently on the surface. And then when it would stop, it would be still as still can be, deep blue sky, and you'd have to dig all your gear out.
These all digital
Yeah,
photos?
these are all digital. Now you notice that the tent is fairly exposed. By the time we left, our tent, you could just barely see the top of it because of the snow drifting all around it. So in a month's time, our tent was way down. Finally, we got a day to fly, and with that meant we were able to get gear and finally get up onto the mountaintop. You can see there's Mount Kirkpatrick where we're going to work, and you had to wear helmets, all the safety gear, make sure you had your glasses on, grease up with snow, with sunscreen, and off we flew. Getting one glacier, you could see them just pouring ribbons of ice as far as the eye can see.
So you couldn't get a sunburn down there, though.
Oh, easily. Wow.
Our graduate student wasn't putting on the sunscreen like he should have, and he got terribly blistered.
Oh, gosh,
He peeled horribly. And the next day he lathered it on, but then one day he forgot and he did it again, and he was in hurting boy for quite a while. Our landing zone wasn't very big. Pilots didn't like us very much for that, and we ended up moving some of these rocks for them so they had a little more room to land. But we were right at the operational limits, and that's our work zone. This is where the dinosaur is, and this was our office. We put in 12-hour days when we could get up there to work. As soon as the sun came around, and this is what we were digging out. This is the gastralia, which is kind of on dinosaurs. Ours is kind of made out of cartilage. Theirs is actually hard bone. And that's this portion. It's like a front rib cage that dinosaurs have. We don't have that. And this was some of the vertebra. And this is the spike off the back of the vertebra. They have those horn spikes off the back of theirs. So you can see that. And that was the other part of the dinosaur that we were trying to pull out of the rock. So a lot of the times you just dug through the scree, meaning by hand you had to just dig through and you found bits and pieces, much like this. And Phil found this chunk of jawbone in here, and you can see where the tooth was broken off right there, and there's the ridge that you would feel on the side of your jaw. And we spent time jackhammering, and we jackhammered primarily because we had to do some handwork as well to get things ready. And this is Marty, and you'll see a picture of him in a minute here. Marty was our dynamiter, and he actually did the 4th of July celebration on Mount Rushmore. And so Marty came up and he set our charges. And I've got great video of this. Kids always love to see the dynamite go off. But we blew 4 times. We did a surface charge and a couple of deep charges to try and move some of the overburden behind it to break out some pieces. We didn't damage anything. That was his skill. And we did a lot of drinking of water because you were so high, the atmosphere just dried you right out. Fortunately, nobody got altitude sickness. The mountaineer actually got a little bit, but he just had a headache. But everybody else was fine. You just had to work very slowly. You were out of breath. Just, you pull on the jackhammer 3 times and you were out of breath. You had to wait to catch your breath. When Peter found our new dinosaur find, Peter actually went off surveying on his own, and he comes back with a bunch of rocks, and he said, "Are these important?" And we're looking at them, and they're tree fossils and bark and stuff like that, fossilized. And at the very bottom, he knew what he had. He had some new bone. And where'd you find that? And it was about 30 meters up and 100 meters down section. And we start running out after it in about 10 steps, and everybody's walking and plugging away because we forget. You're excited, you forget you're at that high altitude, so you're out of breath. And this is what he found. This is part of the pelvic area of a dinosaur. There's part of a long bone in here in this big triangular piece. Probably, thinking it might be either the pubis or the ilium section in there, but that's a guess. Again, we quarried this out. Kevin and Nate quarried. Kevin worked himself sick. He couldn't go up the next day because he had ingested so much dust, and he had come down with a cold that was going around the camp. So he had to spend the next 2 days down at the base camp. Couldn't come up and work, but they quarried out that whole section, and we brought it back, and that's what they're examining now. It's a new dinosaur, some sort of sauropod.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
New.
so it's brand new. We don't know what it is. And if
You were literally breaking
yeah,
ground.
yep.
Wow.
If it turns out to be a brand new species, it will be named after the mountaineer, Peter Braddock. It'll be
Isn't
something
that cool? We
something
gotta
of
follow
Saurus braddockii.
Is this,
And that's the
yeah.
helicopter with our load of rock underneath. That's how we got it out. I slung it out underneath and got back and dropped it on the snow. Interesting story. The last load out, Peter and I were the last 2 on the mountain, and bringing the last load out, and hooked onto the load, and then we climb into the helicopter, and he takes off again, and all of a sudden all the alarm bells go off in the helicopter. We lost lift, the wind stopped, and so without batting an eye, not that I could see his face, but he just laid the helicopter off the side of the mountain, and we thought we were dead. We just started free falling. But he did that on purpose to get the airspeed up to get lift.
But he didn't
Once-
tell you ahead of time.
Well, I mean,
Okay,
he
this
was
is
busy.
it, baby.
Yep. Well, actually, our first thought is he was going to drop the load. We thought he was going to drop the load, and then all the rocks would be smashed and useless. And but he just. So yeah, it was our heart was in our throat for a bit.
The choice between the rocks and Andy, huh?
Yeah. Well.
Okay, you find out what you're worth.
Yep.
That was an experience, huh?
Oh, amazing.
Little adrenaline flow.
That's it. And this is what you see typically. The wind velocities are so high that on the lee side of the mountains, the lower pressure,
Isn't that interesting?
the air condenses. So you get these
Great
amazing.
shot, Andy. Wonderful.
It's just incredible. And this shot, Dr. Curie took it, and he gave me a copy of this. So I have to make sure that we give Phil credit. He had one of those big Nikon digital cameras. And this just gives you the feeling and the impression of the tumultuous power of the wind and the weather.
Theory of nature.
Yeah, because you can see deep blue sky, but here at that's 15,000 feet, so amazing. So when we couldn't work at high altitude, we were able to fly in at low altitude and go to a place called the Gordon Valley. And the Gordon Valley, if we were to cut this off, you'd think you're on the moon. If you saw the pictures from the rovers back, the same coloration of the rocks, and these rocks here, actually I have some to show you.
Say it again, I was out.
These are Venifax. ventifacts,
Wow.
which if you found these around here, these would probably be shaped by water. But these are actually shaped by high velocity winds. A little piece of sand will get in here and start spinning around, and it just drills a hole right through here because there's no water. And so these, and they're polished by the wind. This is a basalt which has been oxidized, and you can see the orange from the iron coming out. So I brought some of these back for the class to show the kids.
Oh, wow.
don't know if you want-
I love it. Of course
Yeah.
I do.
So that's pretty neat stuff. There's nature's own
So
sculptures.
How much metal content in here would you say?
I don't know what the iron is. It's a it's a basalt, so there's iron, magnesium.
Yeah. So it's
It's
what,
a very dense rock.
3 pounds, would you say? 5
Oh,
pounds?
I have no idea.
3 to 5 pounds.
Yeah, I'd say at least 3 to 5 pounds. I was very limited on what I could bring back. I was very
Whatever you can put in your pockets, like Calvin with 6 batteries in his pocket.
Yeah, well, I tried to bring this one rock back, and the pilot wouldn't let me take it. So I had these. I actually gathered on another rock on
Oh,
a
I
mountaintop
love
on the one of the nearby mountains. I picked these up and I carried them back myself because I couldn't fly with them. They were too
Yeah.
heavy. But in this area there was tree stumps, petrified wood, and that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so you think of the American Southwest and petrified wood, and here's some of that material from the Gordon Valley again. You can see the outer bark layer here
Sure.
of the tree. And so it was amazing. It was like a forest that had been chainsawed because all the trees were about this high, stumped over. There was split open bark.
Huge trees, though.
Yeah, those very big trees.
big
Big
trees,
trees.
yeah.
So, here we are in this frozen wasteland with nothing at all living. And you look at this, and this was a very different environment millions of years ago.
Those trees weren't contemporary with that dinosaur.
No, this was much, much younger. These are maybe 100, I'll say 50 million years old.
Yeah.
Here's a coal seam. In fact, I brought back some of the coal from there, too. So, coal deposits, Pennsylvania, we have coal deposits. Here in Antarctica, coal deposits. So much, as Calvin was asking earlier, is how much is exposed? Very little of Antarctica is exposed. Most of it is buried under this snow. And so where you find these exposures, that's where you have to go and look. These are iron concretions. In the sandstone, these iron balls, it looks like the Jolly Green Giant had a marble game going. There's these round balls all over the place, and this is about 8 or 10 inches in diameter. And then these others, this is one that I wanted to bring back. It looked
What
like
is it?
sculpture. It's just another piece of, it's a benefact, just like this, actually much more polished. And again,
That's
a little
amazing.
crack and the sand gets in there and just, you can see the little grains of sand in there. And because the wind is, most of the time, it's blowing 70 miles an hour. So it's constantly
Never
being
seen
worked.
anything like that in my life.
Here's a small long bone that we pulled out from a small dinosaur, sauropod of some sort, in the Gordon Valley. These were much, much younger dinosaurs and smaller. It's probably one of these bones in this small dinosaur. And as I said, we all like to
Look
cook.
what they dug out of the ice.
Yeah. Kevin spent the one
Petrified
day
pizza.
that he wasn't feeling very well, so he actually he made these pizzas on the barbecue grill. And boy, were they good. And we would often dine outside. It was, as I said, if the wind wasn't blowing, it was just delightful. But your food got cold very quickly. In fact, your libations would also turn to very
It
thick.
would get mushy. So
Yeah, it would turn to
good
slush.
place for a margarita, I would say.
Yeah, well, you need something a little stronger than that because
Yeah,
that margarita would freeze
Yeah,
solid.
that'd be gone.
I mean, this would probably be 0 degrees outside right now. You just got used to the temperature. You never thought of it as being cold or uncomfortable. They also gave us very excellent gear, our outer jacks. This is Nate, who will probably end up taking over this research project. Dr. Hammer said that we'd probably try and go back within 3 or 4 years, and he said I'd be included in the trip as a returnee, and I would have primary responsibility for this site, hopefully, and they would go and do the exploration, which is the real important stuff now. At this point, it's just quarrying to see if they can get the rest of that out, so I'll do anything I can to get back
whatever
there.
it takes, sure.
At that camp, we did have a communications tent, and I was in touch with my students via an Iridium phone. The NSF gave me an Iridium phone, and I could email them and send them pictures from the glacier. But at this point, you're so far south, I had to wait till the satellite came over the horizon. When I saw a signal, I'd have to send my image and my
Get it
text, and then it would drop, and I'd have to wait. So it was very difficult. I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to talk to my students back here at 9 o'clock in the day. And we did that a couple of times to talk with them from Antarctica.
But if the sun's up all the time and you're all from our time zone,
Yeah.
why not live on our time zone instead of their time zone?
The Antarctica people going through McMurdo and working on the Beardmore Glacier, we were on New Zealand time because you're going in and out of New Zealand, and your support is New Zealand. So basically, you worked on New Zealand time and their time frame.
Which is what, 6 from us?
It's actually 18 hours because you're in the
Oh,
18
yeah,
hours
sure.
ahead. So it's
Okay.
6 hours off, 18 hours ahead.
Yeah, okay, I got you.
So I was talking to my students from tomorrow, which really blew their
That's
minds.
cool.
I say, I'm talking to you from the future. And they'd say, huh? And I say, yeah, well, it's 3 o'clock in the morning tomorrow morning for you. And
Don't worry about today because it's already tomorrow.
yep.
I love it.
Yeah, so that was great. He was an employee. He was called Commander, and that was his own name, CMDR. And he was a carpenter working for Raytheon, and he was there to take down the main camp. We had our own little tents, but the main camp for the support personnel, the helicopter pilots, the logistics tent, that was put up, and they had a nice place to be. So he would come in, and that was the hardest thing, is knowing when to quit. I mean, it would be 2 o'clock in the morning, you're still working, typing, and the sun's streaming through the window, so you'd have no idea it was
Yeah.
time to quit, and because you had to get up at 6 to catch your flight if you could fly the next day. So we did have some downtime, which we made a game of hammer toss instead of horseshoes. We set our ice anchors in the ground and would toss hammers. And while we were waiting for our plane to get us out of here, we were the last science group in. Actually, myself, the mountaineer, and the two, the graduate student and the tech. I took the old bamboo poles and I made some golf clubs, and we played a round of golf with duct tape golf balls.
Way better than the hickory sticks we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, those hickory games. That's what actually I was thinking about when I said, hey, we could have a game of golf.
Of course.
So that was fun. The pilots like to come in and play a round of golf too. They'd come in and they'd have to burn off some fuel before they could take off because we were at a high elevation. And so while they were burning off fuel, they'd come in and they'd play a round of golf on my course.
I love it.
This was actually the original Beardmore camp, which is underneath the snow, about 12 feet down. And so there's a big controversy whether to remove it for environmental reasons or would it make more damage to remove it and just leave it there. We used part of that old camp as a refrigerator to keep our frozen food in. And so part of the place was used for that. But this section here was the main camp, and you can see this is 12 feet under the surface of the glacier. We left a little sacrifice for the
Of course.
whoever happened to stumble into the place. And also we were starting to get a little crazy because everybody had left. And we were the last science group there, and in fact our scientists had left, and it was just, the rest of us. There were 4 of us, and they tell you in snow school, you never break down your camp until the wheels are down on the aircraft that's taking you out of there, and several planes had come and gone. This was 1 o'clock in the morning.
Very good artwork.
Well, that was Peter. That was Peter, our mountaineer, who was an art teacher. And so we kind of made this homeless shelter because we were starting to feel like we were homeless, that nobody wanted us, and so we made this up. But as I said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Look at the sun. And finally, about 1:30, the plane did land, and we were able to pack up our gear, get on the plane, and get back to McMurdo. That was all that was left of that whole campsite, and that's the main runway. And this is the trail out to where I was, up on top of a peak. So our plane came, we loaded it up, and I'm trying to go a little fast again. There we are. We're back in McMurdo.
Look at this.
And this is Christmas. So I got in just before I got in Christmas Eve. 4 o'clock in the morning, we landed. So I got to sleep. I got up and went down. I was really shaggy. So I got my hair cut back down to my normal buzz, and I shaved my beard off. And so I was all clean, and because I knew I wasn't going back out into the field. And the rest of the team came down for breakfast, and they walked right by me. They didn't even recognize
Didn't even
me.
know who you were. Don't you love it?
Yeah, because I had nice clothes on. I didn't have my survival gear on, and it was all shaved and two different people.
You'll never get rid of the mustache, will you?
No.
Did you grow the hair and beard for heat purposes?
No, actually, because I figured it would be hard to shave down there. And so I just figured that's one less thing to worry about. Actually, the facial hair is hard because you saw the ice build up on it.
Yeah.
And so literally my mustache would grow to my lower beard and like that. But it was just, that was one thing you didn't have to worry about, is having to shave. And because water, you knew we didn't bathe while you're out there for the entire month. What I did was bring baby wipes with me, so you can give yourself a sponge bath in the tent, kind of. But I found a friend of mine had told me about this long distance underwear that has silver actually sewn into it to act as a antibacterial agent, and it's so cold that you can't smell anything anyway. That was the amazing thing, is flying back to New Zealand as we're descending back in on the airplane. All of a sudden, the cabin is flush with the smell of pollen, of flowers.
I thought you were going to say body odor.
Oh, no. No. Well, because in McMurdo, you have showers and everything.
okay,
Everybody gets cleaned up. But
Pollen,
coming,
huh?
then you realize
Wow.
you had been in a place that was devoid of anything
Yeah.
but human and
Yeah.
animal life.
That's cool.
So
You have to bring everything out, right? That you brought,
everything has to come out with
including
you.
your waist.
And the waste all goes up to this big area. And you go up there. Took a hike up there, and all the waste is up there. And they bring it all back to Washington. It all gets, when the ice comes out, they load everything up, and it all comes back to Washington State where it's disposed of. So there's nothing left in Antarctica. These rocks didn't come until April, the end of April,
Oh, I see.
because they had to come out by ship. We couldn't fly these out. All the rocks and everything came in by ship to Washington, and then from Washington by truck to Augustana, and then Augustana he sent them here. But I missed, there's a picture here at the end I want to show you. I don't know what happened to it there. Yeah, this was Christmas in McMurdo. And so at the Mechanized Equipment Center, they had this big Christmas party, Santa with his Oakleys on. And actually, I'll do it this way. This will be a little better. I'll just grab that one, and that one, and that one, that one, and that one, and then we'll just do this. Slideshow, where is it?
All right, what do we got here?
This is the Christmas party at the main site, and you can see Santa in the mosh pit. But young kids here, a lot. There's a lot of support people: dishwashers, cooks, mechanized equipment operators. I don't know if you saw the picture in the paper of me climbing the power
yes,
pole,
by all
hanging
means.
the Christmas decoration. I could have gotten a job. I can go back there now and work for their power company. There's all types of jobs down there, and you can connect through Raytheon, and it's a great way because the people go there. They're exciting people, first of all, and you get these science lectures that happen all the time. It's an amazing environment, and your housing and your food is taken care of, so only your creature comfort. So if you think of it as a military stint, and you just bank your paycheck. They also give you an open-ended ticket. So a lot of people go there and they work the season, and then they fly around the world on their way home.
Why
And
not?
then that's their vacation, and then they
yeah.
go back for the next season, and that's how they live.
Oh,
And they're full-time employees for Raytheon. Some work a long season, what they call wind fly, from the end of winter to the beginning of winter, and some just work for the summer season. And there's different levels of operation, but there's jobs. It's a great place. It's exciting. Christmas, everybody gets into it, and this is
Yeah.
the big deal. You can see, the women were wondering. We had only our mountain gear, so we were pretty poorly dressed. But these other people who have been there often, they bring their national regalia and fancy clothes, and this is the closing shot. This is Mount Erebus again, the volcano and the plume coming off it. This was a day where the winds were again blowing 40, 50 miles an hour, and a group of people wanted to go out to this is called Castle Rock. They wanted to go see Castle Rock, and they got turned back twice, and I said, well, I know how to get there, so I brought a group out. I had some time, and it was rewarded with this picture. It was just so beautiful, very dramatic. And these are the people, Plattsburgh AM Rotary. They donated some money so I could buy some extra memory cards for the trip, so the digital cameras. Press Republican did such a great job.
Didn't they, though?
Helping
a lot
me.
of good comments back here.
Yep, they did a great job. WCX Television, Adam Sullivan, he was in my classroom.
Quite
He
a guy,
followed
isn't
me.
he?
Yep, he's really great, and he's been. When Dr. Hammer came here last month, he was here and covered that.
Did a good job.
Channel 57, Mountain Lake, they lent me that video camera, and we'll put that together. Joe McNichols, a CDW, a local person here in town, gave me a memory card, and Gail and Jay Recor, my neighbors, right next door.
Yeah.
Keeping an eye on my family here, making sure things went well, and they also helped us out in other ways. It just tremendous neighbors. That made me, going away for such a long time, being on the other end of the world, they tell you when you go into this program, you have to remember that you can't go home. If somebody dies, talk to your mom and dad and make sure you say goodbye in case they die.
Oh,
My mom and dad are in their 80s, so we went through that process, because you don't just come out. When your family dies, you're still there.
Think about these people who are isolated and have to have appendectomies and,
Yep.
with all these stories we've heard in the last few years. But it's true of any of us who go. When Kay and I went to the island of Kauai on Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
you wake up in the morning and you look at everything is different.
Yeah.
And you think how far away you are from home. And when you showed that map of how do you get there from here,
Yeah.
Hawaii's way up there and you're still going
Yeah.
for another
Yeah.
20 hours or so down the other end. It's amazing.
It is.
It's wonderful. What a great experience. And
It
you
was.
go in a heartbit, I can tell.
Oh yeah, I'm ready to go back.
You're ready to go again.
I'm working. There's a couple of physicists who have a project, and I might be able to go with them. They're doing neutrino capture in the upper atmosphere. They have a balloon that actually circumnavigates the South Pole, and I'm trying to work to go back with them. But it's a very addictive place. I've never seen anything like it in the world. And you think it would be boring because it's just snow and ice, but it's so dramatic. And then when you see a little bit of life, out on that Beardmore camp, I said I saw a skua, and nobody believed me. I said, a skua flew by, and they said, no, we're too far away from anything. And the next morning, everybody's out there on the landing pad, we're waiting for the helicopters to wind up, and a skua comes down. And I said, see? Right there. And they all said, we've never seen one. In all the years they've been that deep into the Antarctica, they've never seen one. So something's going on. The world is changing. That's the whole purpose of this International Polar Year that's going to come in 2007 through 9. There's something happening to the atmosphere. There's something happening to the world. Whether it's humans that have forced it, whether it's just the natural shape of things, we have to be aware of it. We have to make humans aware of it. We have to make government aware of it so we can react to it. We may not be able to do anything about it, but we have to be able to react.
Andy Sajor, this has been an extreme pleasure for me. it's nice to meet people who are curious about their own surroundings and about what's happening in the rest of the world. And, you know, we've talked off camera today about the exploration of space. But on this hunk of mud and ice and snow, there is so much more than the average person and their daily rigmarole of their lives imagines. Thanks to you, you bring it back to us. You bring it to your students and touch them in ways that hopefully will inspire them to do great things. And you already have a legacy, and you're just a young guy. You're not an old guy, you're a young guy.
Yeah.
So, figuratively and literally, there are many more mountains to climb. And if anybody's going to climb them just to see what's up there, it'll be Andy Sajor.
I hope so.
So thanks again for inviting
Thank you,
us into
Gordon.
your home. It's wonderful to share your friendship and your family. Say hi to everybody.
Well, it's been great. It's
For
been
us-
wonderful knowing you through all these years, and,
It's a-
and to do something like this with you now is something I never thought would
It's a
happen.
lot of fun. And that makes it even more special when I end the show the way I always do. Who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner?